Welcome back to Talkin Shop with ShopSabre. I'm Brandon, back with the gang for a new episode this week. Got Chad, Nick, Travis, Kai.
We're all here?
We're all here. Episode 101.
Uh-oh.
Whoa. What's going on, guys?
Cars.
Cars. That's what I hear. Here, the topic of the day is cars.
F them.
F 'em. Oh,
I'm
that's...
going to bring rollerblading back.
Well, I don't know if that's... I don't think that's a great idea, but...
For a moment, pretend that I don't know anything about metallurgy, engineering, or physics, and just tell me what the hell is going on.
What's going on, Chad?
Oh, my head gasket, I think.
Car problems.
Cars.
We call it Car Problem Tuesday. What day is today?
Tuesday.
We're recording on
tomorrow's
Tuesday.
gonna
You'll
be
hear this on Wednesday.
Yep.
So we're going to call this Car Problem Tuesday-ish Wednesday. But yeah, Chad doesn't like cars right now. What about you guys? What's going on in your lives?
Got really hot and it got cold.
It did.
Kind of depressed about that.
It was 80 degrees here in Minnesota for 3 days.
Got him golfed.
Hey, one second. Hey, Belinda, what was it? 3 days of 80 degrees?
Wednesday and Thursday it was almost 90.
Almost 90. Okay, so Belinda says it was...
Record highs for sure.
Record highs
Record highs.
Monday
for 2
and
days.
Tuesday were at least 60s.
Then Saturday, it just fell off a cliff.
It did drop 45 degrees and
And then it snowed on
almost 50
Sunday.
degrees and we had rain.
31
It snowed.
2
Snow on
inches
Sunday,
of
yeah.
snow on the ground.
I woke up to snow on Sunday.
Yep.
We went from 90 degrees to snow. Welcome to Minnesota.
Hey, but the grass is really green.
It's super green.
Yeah, it is.
Can't get out there and mow it because everything's so wet that you're going to be in
Right.
trouble once it gets long. But it's really green right now.
Had big plans to go practice some golf tonight, but that seems to have fallen through.
Really? Is it because of car problems?
Perhaps.
I mean, the good news is that the minivan will fit a lot more people in it if you wanted Chad to drive.
I'll go pick those up tonight.
Good call. We can go practice in the rain and cold tomorrow and Thursday.
What about Friday?
Cold. Saturday, cold.
Really?
Sunday, 55. I'm busy though.
Is it supposed to be raining?
We'll try again next week.
It's supposed to rain, I think, tonight.
I
or
like how his
tomorrow.
answer was, I'm busy though.
Going to the Twins game.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the weather right now, just so everybody knows. I'm looking it up because I want to see if these guys are lying to me because I feel like it can't be that cold all the time.
Is it supposed to rain or snow or just be cold?
Wednesday, Thursday, rain, thunderstorms.
I don't feel
Friday's going to be decent.
my
It's just going to be
weather
like
thing
40,
works.
42 degrees.
There it is.
Sunday, like 45.
He's not wrong. 54, 47, 45, 43, 40, 40. It's going the wrong direction.
Saturday morning, I got to ride the Harley to Faribault. Get a new tire
You
on.
might want to put it in your trailer or the back of the minivan and haul it to
Hey.
Faribault.
Hey, what's your minivan doing on Saturday? Can you haul Travis to Faribault?
Nope.
That one's a little too old for the stow and go, so we'll have to just take the seats out, I bet.
The stow and go. I like it. Yeah, so I know last week we talked a little bit about, education and support. And then I needed education and support on this podcast stuff.
I actually thought about that this week when we were talking about this darn thing.
Yeah, it wasn't working, and I thought it was broken. So I called the podcast people and was like, hey, my boy Chad can't listen to anything. His headphones don't work. And the guy said, did you try plugging it in? I was like, aha.
Did he actually say that?
Yeah, he did. I'm like, got me with the old check the plug-in. And I said, yep, check that. He said his headphones work when it's in the other ports, but not his own. He goes, oh, let's reset it. I'm like, resetting it never works. So we reset it and it worked. So
That was after you hollered for a paperclip, though.
yeah, because I was trying to get the lint out of it. You know how lint gets down in the
Yeah,
little. Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna get some lint out of this while I'm waiting. Hit the reset button. The guy says, reset buttons don't work. Oh, never mind. It's working. We're good. Thank you.
That's pretty funny.
So, like I said, he helped me with that, and then he showed me what I did wrong. I hit the mute button.
It was nice that you could call them.
Yeah, it was cool. They answered the phone. They're really helpful. I don't know how I hit the mute button, but must have been when we were cleaning in here or whatever. That
Where is this mute button?
these are the big red ones.
Doesn't it change a different color when it's muted?
Oh yeah,
So we just never noticed one. That's quite a bit brighter
Yeah.
than what they're at.
That's all it was.
But if you're not looking directly at it.
correct,
probably
exactly.
Right.
Like if you're not paying attention to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I found out is one was muted and it was him. Sorry,
What do the top ones do?
I don't think they were buttons. I'm pretty sure they're just colors.
No, they have to do something.
It turns really bright pink.
I don't know what just did, but we're gonna turn it back off.
Maybe we could call back and get more support.
Yeah, I'm gonna call back and ask him what the bright button just did. But yeah, we were talking a little bit after last week's episode though, and Chad, you brought up a good topic. I thought we were talking about vacuum pumps, and you talked about vacuum hold down, and kind of we just had a conversation about it. It was just one of those things where you and I were talking, and it was like I think, and I'm going to be honest, I think it was more or less we were complaining a little bit about.
Correct.
Yeah, I think we were complaining about some of the competitors and what they were quoting customers, and you had just done a comparison, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Chad? And basically, the customer didn't know what he didn't know. He thought he was getting the same machine for a lot less money. And you were so frustrated because you're like, had he not shared that quote with me, this guy would have been just completely misled to believe he was getting something different.
Correct.
And so, today's episode has to do with continuing on that topic of education. And in some way, I kind of want to talk about the vacuum pumps. I think you brought a good point last week, Chad. And, we've been seeing a growing increase in the Chinese machines and the lower quality equipment. And thus, one thing we're noticing is, like you said, lack of properly quoting when it comes to things like vacuum hold down and the pumps that people are seeing on these quotes. All they're seeing is, oh, it has a vacuum system just like you. Mm-hmm. But they're not actually getting apple to apple.
Not getting the CFM, not getting the pressure.
Yeah. For myself, I think it's unfair to the customer, to be honest. I mean, I think that's where kind of our conversation came up, was because, they're really being taken advantage of, by sneaky sales guys. And some companies play on the fact that the customer doesn't know what they're looking for or looking at. And thus they just take advantage of them because they know they can say anything they want. Nobody's going to be able to fact check them.
Yep. Say vacuum, say a similar name.
And that's what got us, I think. And let's just go there. I mean, let's just call it for what it is. Let's call a spade here. Becker is the name, right?
Becker.
Yeah, Becker vacuum pumps. Phenomenal pumps. But they make multiple sizes, they make multiple ratings, and they also make styles. They have a vein root style pump, which is their VTLF series, and then they make regenerative blowers.
But don't they also have other pumps for, like, they don't just make pumps for CNC machines. They make pumps for all sorts of
And that's where I was going, is
Yep.
that the regenerative blowers that Becker makes is not for CNC.
Correct.
It's actually, funny story, leading into the next topic. The Becker vacuum pump, the blower, is actually designed for vacuum lifts.
Like lifting your material up off the...
Correct. Which, news, we now sell vacuum lifts at ShopSabre. So, pretty excited about that. So, if you need a vacuum lift for your shop, you can call ShopSabre or go to our website, ShopSabre.com, and you can inquire about it. But we are starting to sell the Schmalz vacuum lifts. We have them in a Ergo 65, 85, and 140. And it helps people lift sheets. Basically, rather than having to have a forklift in your shop or having to manhandle this material around, it's a very space conservative lifting system. It uses literally a handheld wand, basically. You pick up the material and it basically zero gravities out the sheet for you, and you can lift it up, move it where you need to go, and it's easy to load. I mean, Sean Morley bought one for his shop on his production stuff, and he has a 14-year-old son, and his son loads the machine without a problem.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it really makes it so you can lift material without breaking your back. But the point of what I was saying there, just kind of was a good segue there, was the pumps that they use on those are by Becker, but they're a blower. They're designed to do something completely different. They're not holding parts from moving around. They're just lifting a sheet. It's all, based on CFM in that situation. Pull the material, move it to the area. And, it uses a vacuum cup, and it's a dedicated source of where that air is going. Where when you get into CNC, routers, in hold down, there's a whole different level of technology there. So, like I said, for me, it's unfair to the customer because they're being taken advantage of. Do you guys agree?
Absolutely.
I mean, when you guys, I guess, tell me a little bit about what you guys are seeing. I mean, what are you hearing, Travis? What are you hearing, Chad? What are you seeing on quotes? And maybe it's not just vacuum pumps. We'll get into the vacuum pumps here. We'll talk about vacuum hold down in a little bit here. But what are you seeing about that misleading kind of feel?
I think it's calling something similar to a name brand thing, but it not being name brand. So we have the Opti Scout, and you
Yep.
see that with other vision systems that are made by who knows where and why.
Private label, just knockoffs.
Yep. Versus being, a name brand #1 vision system in the world. So does both machines do it? Well, because technically, maybe, but the OptiScout's going to definitely perform better, have better support.
Yeah, for sure.
So I was thinking spindles, obviously many different brands out there. We obviously work with a good name brand, HSD, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of these other ones like the Hi-Techos, and these guys are like, they're the same exact spindle. No, they're not. Otherwise, they'd be an HSD.
Yeah. And I mean, and again, some of these spindles aren't bad. I mean, the Hi-Teco,
Right.
they make a good spindle still.
Right.
And there's other spindles out there that you can buy that are decent spindles, but like you said, they're not the same brand. And as you said, the knife or the OptiScope, but the knives, there's so many other things on these machines that people look at, and it's like, well, they quoted me the vacuum, they quoted me the tool changer, and they quoted me the knife, but they didn't say a brand.
Or you find out that the knife was a Donic drag knife and not
Correct.
a tangential oscillating knife.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, they quoted you a knife, a razor blade, but the other thing is, some of these companies are really knockoff, low quality, Chinese parts, and I hate to be the guy that harps on that, but I don't hate to be that guy. You know why? Because American made still matters, and it matters to me. And some people say, "Oh, you know what? You can't tell me you've never bought anything out of China." You're right. I will never say that to you. There are certain products that you just buy because that's where they come from, and I'm forced to do it. But I will tell you that in my household, and if my wife was sitting here, she would vouch for me. I can guarantee you that because she gets so mad at me sometimes. But in my household, we look for American made where we can, and we try to understand what we're getting. And I ask a lot of questions when we're buying products. I want to know where the parts are out of. I want to know where they've built the product. That is important to me. We've looked at a few things for our house recently, and that's the first question I've asked all of them is, hey, where is this made? And one guy said China. And I was like, I'm not interested in it. And he was like, well, I mean, it's just as good as the other one. And I said, no, it's not. Like you've already sold me that I don't want to buy from you, because if you're willing to lie to me and tell me it's as good as the ones out of the United States or out of these other countries, we all know that China didn't get its reputation for building quality equipment. Like that's the problem, is the world has become okay with it. They're starting to tolerate it.
It's just like a lot of the customers that you guys talk to. Like if you tell somebody that doesn't know any better, they're not going to know until somebody like our sales guys educate them on what they're actually getting compared to what they're quoting.
So let's talk about the vacuum hold down, right?
Yeah.
You got something to add in there? You sound like you
Well,
got
I
something
was
to add.
going to say, because it always used to make me mad with the older guys. Oh, you kids just throw everything away. You kids just throw everything away. Back in my day, we used to fix everything. Well, back in your day, you used to buy American-made stuff that you could fix. All I can buy is China junk that you outsourced.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
That's what you want to respond to the guys with.
Well, they used to say, you guys are just like the throwaway generation.
Correct.
You just throw anything away.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, well, yeah, because you guys aren't building it here anymore.
Correct.
So I had to buy junk. And
Right.
once junk is junk, it's junk.
Right.
Well, that's exactly it. And that's the truth. And I'm glad you said it, because that's the thing that people say, well, we used to fix things. I would love to fix everything I could. The problem is nowadays it's built so damn cheap, it's not worth the time to fix it anymore.
Correct.
It's not just a quick, replace that one little thing and it's working again. The whole thing's trashed. So that's the problem, is we've gotten okay with that generation of building things to just last long enough, not to last forever.
Exactly.
And so, as I was saying, kind of a segue into, let's talk about vacuum for a second, because, the first and most important thing I think it's worth saying is that there's many ways to hold down parts. Is there not, guys?
For sure.
Absolutely.
And there's no rules to hold down. I think that we can all say that. There's not a rule out there that says like, hey, you can only hold it. Like, holding's holding, right? Figure out a way to hold the material down. That's the rule, right?
Some holding is faster than other holding.
Correct. There might be a right and a wrong way to do it, but I mean, if you want to stand on the table and hold your material down with your feet, I've seen it done.
I don't think ShopSabre recommends
I do
that.
not recommend it, but I saw it with my own eyes. We went to a shop, me and my dad, many, many years ago, and this dude gets up on the table, and he's literally standing on his table, and he starts his machine, and he stands there, and as the gantry comes at him, he like steps over the gantry. And mind you, this is 10 years ago. Machines were a lot slower back then, so you kind of knew. But he knew exactly where that machine was going all the time. And he's trusting that the machine was not going to make a mistake, that he wasn't going to have a problem, because he literally stepping on the sheet holding. And we watched him do it. And my dad was like, that's terrible. But we watched a guy do it. And it's
Is that a pressure foot?
That was his pressure foot. Yeah. That's about what you'd call it, you know? But for me, I was just mind blown. You know, I'm like, this is really what he's doing. Mind blown.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I like that one. But the reality is, like, I guess it worked, right? So I'm not going to say that you can't come up with your own ideas, okay? But what I'm going to say is that some people use tape, right? We've seen people double-sided tape, 3M tape, things like that.
Yep.
Glues. We've seen screws, right? People screw things down to the tabletop.
Painter's tape and glue.
Yeah, I was just going to say that one too. That's a good one. People use painter's tape and super glue.
Don't they have those like nylon screws now that you can cut through?
Yep. The nylon like nailers or whatever they are. Yep. And then, you know, obviously there's clamps and there's, you know, obviously all kinds of things. But let's just talk about what today's topic's about. Vacuum, right? That's the most popular. Would we not say that?
Absolutely.
So vacuum hold down it's quick, it's easy, it allows for multiple setups a lot of times without converting the table. That's really the huge advantage to vacuum hold down. And this is referring to, you know, in many applications, it's referred to as through flow manufacturing because you use a spoil board, put your material on top of it, the air flows through the spoil board, grabs a hold of the top surface, whatever you're cutting, and sandwiches it all together. And that way, when you cut parts out, there's no clamps, screws, anything sitting there.
It's hard to believe unless you see it.
Well, I lost $100 one time on it. Did I ever tell you that story?
That's my favorite thing to show people when they come here is how well the Becker holds things in place.
Yeah, it's crazy. First time I ever did it, I was here, and my brother, he challenged me that I couldn't move a sheet with my hands, and I'm like, I can move a sheet, so I moved it around, and he's like, okay. He turned the pump on. He's like, you won't be able to move it anymore. And I'm like, whatever. Like, it's not gonna be able to hold it through that material. He goes, I'll bet you $100 you can't move it. I'm like, easiest $100 I ever made. Deal. Lost $100. So, yeah, I learned really fast that vacuum hold down is a stronger method than you think, you know? But the advantage to it is that you're not sitting there having to gasket things. And, you know, years ago, you used to have to use pods, and it wasn't as efficient. And in today's world, you know, through flow manufacturing is kind of taking over. It's nested-based operation, right? Yep. You know, they refer to nested-based because, as an example, let's look at cabinets, right? You can take a sheet of material, break down a cabinet, and a base cabinet fits on a sheet of material. So now you can put all your parts in one sheet, and the air or the vacuum is holding it in place. So you don't have to put screws, you don't have to clamp it down. You just start cutting, and those parts all stay in place.
So you use the pins, you bump the sheet up there, so now you know it's perfectly aligned.
Yeah.
And then the vacuum just sucks it down.
So much easier.
Seems quick.
Yeah. But let me ask you guys, what are some common applications where you see vacuum hold down being used? What applications are you guys personally selling with vacuum on them?
Nick, we're leaning on you for this one. Cabinets, C-deck,
for sure. Signs.
Yeah.
Basically anything you're having a sheet of material and cutting parts out of.
So we got, I mean, that's the nice thing. Like you said, really anything. But so, cabinet industry is huge.
Huge. It's a must-have.
Must have.
You cannot do
Cabinets,
it without
closets, doors, drawers, all that stuff, right?
Yep.
Then you get into, somebody said C-deck.
Me.
C-deck. The boat interior. Like we sell a machine specifically for cutting EVA C-deck material. It's a marine application machine, but yeah, you need vacuum to hold it down. Then you run into signs, right, Travis? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Signage. Again, you have big sheets that you're going to cut small parts out of, right?
A bunch of different material, too, with those guys.
Yeah, tons of different material. So setting up a fixture isn't going to make sense because every sign might be different.
Mm-hmm.
So
and that's, again, too, vacuum pumps make a big difference, too, because certain pumps are going to hold those pieces way better than others.
Yeah. So now that we know how the system can be used, right, we have a bunch of applications here. What makes it work? It's the combination of vacuum pressure versus volume. Basically, HG is the number you're looking at, which is their pressure rating, versus or plus CFM, which is your volume. And generally speaking, it's a misunderstood with vacuum because pressure increases with pumps, right? Or does not increase. Even my brain went backwards. Pressure does not increase with more pumps.
Correct. CFM does.
Correct. So as you look at it, your HG rating on a pump is your HG rating. That is the technology. That pump produces a set amount. So if it's rated at 1, it's 1 forever. You could put a bunch of pumps together and it's still one. And so stacking pumps together doesn't increase your holding power. It only increases your flow. So pressure is related to the pump technology, and therefore one pump or 100 pumps, the pressure is going to be based on that technology. It does not change. So as an example, 1 HG, 100 pumps, right? Still 1 HG. But 100 CFM, 10 pumps, how many are you going to end up with there?
10,000 CFM.
You're going to end up with 1,000.
Oh, I should have looked at the sheet.
But again, you can use that one pump. So 1 HG, 100 CFM, and you can put 10 pumps in a row. You're still 1 HG. Your pressure does not change. The holding force of that pump does not change. Even though you have a bunch of pumps running, you're wasting a ton of electricity and you're making a bunch of noise. It doesn't change. All you're moving is air. And that's where the noise comes from. That's where everything is. So you have 1,000 CFM. Great. But 1 CFM or 1 HG is not enough to hold parts down.
Yep.
So that scenario obviously is a bit outlandish, right? Let's be honest with each other. Like it's an extreme. You're not going to typically see people putting 10 pumps. You're not going to see people putting pumps that small or weird, right? But we do see situations where some of the competitors might put 2 pumps on their quote.
Yep.
Right? And they're trying to wow you. You get 2 vacuum pumps with this machine, but it's rated at 5 or 6 HG.
Correct.
So it's still 5 or 6 HG, just 2 pumps doing it.
Yep.
Correct.
So now you end up with 300 CFM between the 2 pumps. Go ahead.
So just a question, like, is that something you guys see where somebody that is not as educated as some other customers, where a company's going to try to sell them 2 pumps saying you'll get more?
It happens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I've had a customer that has had that quote before he talked to me and says, well, I don't understand. Your pumps are underrated. You only have 1 pump and they have 2. So that's when you actually have to explain they're regenerative blower pumps. That's why they have 2. But this pump that I'm quoting you has over double the amount of CF or the HG. And then the customer's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And it's factually proven. It's not just, that guy's just selling them because it's right. He's just selling them to sell it.
Got it.
Yeah, and it's worth talking about that. Let's dive into that. I'm glad you brought that question up because ultimately, what is holding the part down when you're cutting? Any idea? Any guesses?
Pressure.
Pressure. Well, you knew the answer. No, it's good. You're right because people, I think, commonly think it's suction.
Like flow.
Yeah. Well, people think that the pump is pulling down on the part and physically holding the part in place. And that's not how it works at all. The way vacuum hold down works is it's removing pressure from below the surface of the material, effectively removing air from underneath the material, thus increasing the weight above the material. Atmospheric pressure above the material now is higher
So it's forcing it down.
than below it. So therefore, gravity is essentially pushing down on the material. It's not the pump sucking against it as hard as it can. It's the absence of pressure below it. Basically, right now, when you walk, you're sitting at we have gravity, right? We have a set atmospheric pressure here. Basically what you're doing is you're removing it and you're creating that downward force. It's creating downforce, if you will, right? Which allows there to be more pressure against the top side than the bottom, thus making it not want to move. It's just like a race car. When you look at race cars, they put these ground effects on cars, right? And they try to eliminate how much air goes under a car. And therefore, the air is forced to go over the top of the car,
So it
therefore
pushes the
pressing
car
the
down.
car down. The car can go faster and you don't have issues. And that's why race cars, when they get sideways and you change the force of the direction of air, the amount of air moving over that car in a different direction does not bode well because it then equals the pressure and cars go airborne. So it's very similar when it comes to vacuum hold down. Hold down is gravity, atmospheric pressure, not suction. And so a pump removes the air below the sheet and lowers the pressures below the surface, increasing the weight of gravity and pressure against the part. This is why the maximum HG you can truly achieve on any vacuum pump is going to be 29.9212. You know why? Because that's atmospheric pressure. That's what the Earth has. It's also known as barometric pressure. Obviously, Nick, you probably know a little bit about that with, being Belinda Jensen.
A little bit.
But it has, a lot to do with, obviously, your atmosphere and pressures, and the reality is that's why when you look at vacuum pumps, 29 is considered perfect. That's like as good as you can get. Not many woodworking pumps produce 29. It's pretty tough.
Seems like it'd be impossible.
No, you can do it, but it's a different technology. Like claws can do it.
Okay.
But the problem you run into with a claw style pump is they're tight tolerance pumps. And in a dusty environment, that's not good. Because if dust gets into the claw, that tolerance isn't enough to accept that dust. And therefore it wears and scores the insides of the pumps and then burns the pumps up. Or creates a fire.
And the Beckers that's designed for it, if dust got in there, it's going to blow it.
It doesn't affect it at all, yeah. Because for one, they have filter systems that keep dust from getting inside there. But it's a sealed system with a vane and root. So the vane is actually what's creating the force. And that's why Becker pumps, like when you look at the VTLF series that we offer, they produce, 24 to 27, depending on if you're going with the SK pump or not, right?
Yep.
That's a pretty dang good amount of suction when you think about it. I mean, when you look at regenerative blowers, they're generally in the low teens.
Yep.
So at low to mid 20s, that's incredible. Significant pressure increase. So that's why when you start thinking about holding parts down, and the smaller the parts are, the more pressure you need, because the surface area of that part isn't very big. So therefore, as you apply that pressure per square inch, you have less square inches to apply it to. Therefore, you need more pressure. So hopefully somebody listening, I'm kind of helping you better understand how vacuum works here. But CFM is still important because CFM ultimately is the amount of air being moved out from underneath it. So if you have no CFM, it's not going to work, obviously. But the reality is what you're trying to do is eliminate all the air underneath the part. And that's where gasketing a part makes sense in warped situations, because you don't want the air leaking out. Because as soon as the air leaks out, because one thing I always say is air always will go the area of least resistance. Therefore, porous materials, warped materials, missing material, the air is going to go to those places. So you want to minimize how much leakage you get. The less leakage you have, the better hold down forces you'll have. And so it's all important. So like I said, the vane root pumps are the best for holding force, the Becker VTLF series. But a Becker regenerative blower is really, really low pressure because it's meant to move volume, not create force.
I thought its CFM wasn't like terribly high too. Is it like
it depends on horsepower rating.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. I mean, if you were to compare, let's go equal numbers, right? If you were to say the VTLF 2.250 pump, which is a 8.9 horsepower vane root style pump, right? Mm-hmm. If you compare that pump versus a 8 horsepower regenerative blower, yeah, it's going to be very similar in CFM, but almost a quarter of the actual holding force.
Yep.
And that's why when you look at regenerative blowers, historically, you need to go with massive horsepower rated pumps.
Yep.
When you get into, my recommendation, anybody looking at pumps, if you're going to buy a regenerative blower, do not settle for anything less than 20 horsepower. Especially if you're going with a 4x8 table or larger. You need 20 horsepower or larger. And in most cases, I would say go to 25. And that's why, because once you get to that level, then you produce CFM that will overcome the leakage. Because if you're going to leak a bunch of air, then you got to overcome it. You got to be able to bleed so much air that you don't run out of volume.
Okay.
So that's a big part of it. The other thing is warpage. As you think about sheets and they're warped, and every sheet's got some warpage to it. That's not our concern. Every sheet doesn't have to be perfectly flat, but it's when you get really severely warped material, more CFM helps in those scenarios too. It's going to help you pull down on it. So, there's some things to think about there, but the reason volume matters is because it only achieved when the part, is able to reach suction. If you don't get to a suction number, if you're not able to create suction, the HG number doesn't matter. Nothing matters. You could have 28 HG, but if you have 5 CFM, you're never going to get to 28. Not unless you gasket it or,
Because it's not moving enough air.
It's not moving any air. Yeah, basically, it's not moving anything. So, that's where, though, that being said, if you were to gasket around a part and then you introduce a low volume pump, it'll work because the horsepower is going to be enough to eliminate the air underneath it, right? It might not be as fast, but it will get all that air out of there eventually, and then you've created zero air underneath it and thus created a holding force.
With like a vacuumed off or a sealed off fixture.
Correct, yeah.
So like the guitar videos and like
Correct.
Didn't we do like a state logo or something
Yep.
that Bob did?
Yep. That's exactly how we can do that, is because we accomplish that by saying, you know what, like I said, we sell the F4, right? And the F4 works really, really well when used properly. It's because if you utilize the F4, it's built like a regenerative blower, which is high CFM, lower holding force. But if you're doing large parts or gasketed, sealed off areas, it doesn't matter. It's going to hold it. Everybody good? We're all up to speed now?
Yep.
Travis, any questions?
Any questions, Travis?
So far, so good.
No, that's good. But, you know, like I said, I'm kind of throwing a lot of information out there right now, but I think this is important because a lot of people I don't think understand this side of vacuum. And, you know, CFM is important for porous materials, warped materials, things like that. And that's where stacking pumps make sense in some applications. That's why you see duplex Beckers.
Or if you're 7,000 feet above sea level.
Bingo. That's the other thing that you have to think about is as you go higher in elevation, you actually lose pressure. So you can't get away with lower pressure pumps when you go up in elevation. As an example, an F4, if you go to 8,000 elevation, it's useless.
Yep.
It's because you have to. One thing that people lose track of here is that rule of thumb with vacuum is every 1,000 feet you go up, you lose 1 inch of pressure, or Hg, mercury. So as you start to go up, your pressure starts to go down. So if your pump starts at 11 Hg and you go up 8,000 feet, well, 11 minus 8,
3.
yeah, we got 3 Hg. You're not holding anything. So that's where guys will buy the SK series by Becker, or they'll buy specific Becker pumps designed for high elevation because they produce high Hg ratings. That way, as you start to go up and you start to subtract, you still end up with a respectable number. And that's why we have companies that are located in the mountains and in, you know, Colorado and things like that, where we do have to sell them special pumps because they're at 6, 7, 8,000 feet, but they still need a vacuum pump that holds the material.
Yep.
And that's where we have to find them a solution. And so that's, again, where you start to look at, as you said, Chad, a guy might go, hey, I need 2 Beckers because the SK system produces 27 inches of vacuum, right? But he's at 8,000 feet. So now it's only producing 19, and he needs more CFM to overcome that. So now he's going to put 2 pumps together. So it's something to think about. Like I said, it's a big part of achieving the right product is understanding where you're installing it, what you're cutting, what you're trying to achieve. Because the size of your parts also make a difference on what pump you're going to run.
Yep.
What material you run. I mean, slippery materials, right, guys? Slippery materials are going to require you to have more holding force.
Yep.
Small parts under 1 square foot.
Yeah. You know, if you get under a square foot, 12 by 12 parts or smaller, 145 inches, right? Square inches of material. You got to start thinking about stronger pumps because, again, area of least resistance. You have to remember that. Science is science. The sales guy can tell you anything he wants to tell you, but science is science. And at the end of the day, the vacuums work based on science.
Correct.
So, you know, that's just kind of the way it is. And as you start looking at it, you know, there's a lot of new buttons in front of me here, and I want to push buttons, but I don't even know what they do.
You sit on a throne of lies.
Well, I know what that one does now. But yeah, it's, you know, as you start thinking about that stuff, and then, you know, this is when companies try to sell you pumps that are, you know, knockoff technology and not appropriate. You end up fighting the system, right? And this is where people's problems happen, is that a lot of sales guys don't understand even what I explained to you. I bet I'd be willing to bet 75% of the people that are selling CNC equipment couldn't tell you what I just told you.
I don't think most companies offer multiple pumps like we do.
Correct.
I always see them with.
You know why? Because pumps fight each other. And if your system's not set up correctly, you'll backflow into the other pump and pull the pump in reverse. They'll fight each other. So if you don't do it correctly, multiple pumps don't work. They end up fighting each other and you end up causing other problems.
And I would say also multiple, like different kinds, like Becker,
Yeah,
F4,
levels.
FPZ.
Yep.
Like we have.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you meant like tandem pumps. But I see what you're saying. Yeah, like they don't even offer different levels. They just sell one brand.
This is the Becker pump we offer with this machine.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, the low CFM, low HG stuff can really kind of screw you. You know, it's one of those things where you end up in a problem because parts are flying all over the place and you're getting pissed off.
Or you're the guy that's going slower and saying to everybody vacuum doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because you were sold something that was inadequate for what you're doing.
We have seen that too. Yeah, where people just don't believe vacuum's the answer.
My
Like,
buddy told me vacuum doesn't work. Well,
Yeah.
what pump is he running? What table does he have? How is their tabletop cut? I mean, we have our high flow vacuum grid, which has the V-guide channels where we get better airflow through the tabletop versus a flat bottom NEMA table.
Yeah, it's that's the difference is that there's people don't even realize it, but there's different vacuum grids too. Like that is a huge part of it too. Is that it's not just the pump. It's how is the grid made? How is the tabletop cut? Is the table flat? What piping is under the machine?
I forgot about that. The
Yeah.
hard piping or flex piping.
Yeah, like there's so many ways to do this, and you could end up with a real problem. But hey, remember, they're both the same. They both have vacuum.
Yeah. Or the manifold in the front plenum.
Yeah, let's talk about vacuum for a second here. Let's talk about the pumps, the technology. We've kind of touched on it, but I want to make sure we go down that road. It's what vacuum technologies exist, guys? What pumps do you know about?
Regenerative blowers.
So that's the Becker regenerative that we talked about, the FPZ regeneratives. There's some, we have the F4, obviously.
The vein root style.
Vein root, which is Becker, right? We got Becker.
How about the tangential bypass?
Yeah, that's the F4, exactly. So we got the tangential bypass, which is a regenerative blower, but with a pass-through filter. So basically, debris goes in it and comes back out of it. It's basically what you see in, like, a lot of times, a tangential bypass motor is common in car washes, right? Those type of, like, scenarios where debris can get into them and get back out of them, but they move a lot of air. What about the claw style that we talked about? I mean, we don't sell claw for a reason because it's not for our application.
I thought I heard those were for conveyor belts.
There's a lot of uses for them.
Okay.
Yeah, packaging, things like that. But claws are high pressure situations. A lot of people use them in really clean environments because dust and debris getting into them is really bad for them. And therefore, a woodworking shop is probably not the best spot for a claw pump. But people make it happen. People make it work. I'm not going to say it won't work, but it's definitely not the design of that pump. But let me ask you guys this. What pump is the best?
The VTLF series.
The VTLF series.
Depends on the application.
There's the answer. It depends.
Becker.
No pump is better than another pump without understanding what you need. Like that's the truth of it. It's like Becker makes a very good pump. I mean, as a brand, I will say Becker is right up there with the top of the options worldwide. But it doesn't matter if you don't know what you're trying to do with it, because one pump isn't going to solve all your world problems, right? If it was, then yes, there'd only be one pump manufacturer. Everybody do it the same. These different pump technologies exist because there's different needs and different applications. And some pumps are better for some people versus other people. So just because your friend has one doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Your friend might not be cutting the same material you are, might not be cutting the same size parts you are. There's a multitude of things that can affect why it works for your friend and doesn't work for you. So eyes on your own bobber. Figure out what you need. Ask your sales guy to explain to you why he's quoting you the pump he is. Because your sales guy should be able to tell you that. And if he can't, he doesn't even know what he's selling you. Because when we talk about CNC routing, the best pumps are generally going to be vein or root style pumps, right? For nested based applications. Obviously you said Chad Becker. That's where I recommend too. And the rule of thumb, so you can size appropriately, is you don't really ever want to be below 10 HG. Anything under 10 HG is really not designed for CNC. And especially when you're doing nested based. And the CFM that you're going to need is a minimum of 5.5 CFM per square foot of table. So
that means pumps need to get larger when you go up in size?
Correct.
Same pump on a 4x8 cannot be the same pump on a 6x12?
Correct. 100% correct on that. And that's one of the bigger mistakes I see out there too, is that people get quoted these pumps on a 5x10 table that are designed for 4x8 or might even struggle on a 4x8, but yet they're telling them, yeah, you can buy it on a 5x10. You can do anything once. Go ahead. Like, wear a nut cup and safety goggles because that piece of material is coming off the machine. Just saying. But, when you look at a 4x8, 5x10, like you said, you need to talk about the appropriate size of pump. And, undersizing is very common, unfortunately. It's a common part that you see with sales guys because, again, as you said it earlier, Chad, a lot of them sell one pump. Mm-hmm. This is what we sell.
It's a low cost, so it makes their pricing seem lower.
Yep.
It's the main game.
Yeah, so let's talk about the vein root for a second. Benefits of them. They're lower heat, lower noise, and they're really not affected by dust. They produce high HG or holding force, and the one thing I love about them is they can be stacked together to achieve higher CFM as needed. But what's the other downfall to vein root style pumps, guys?
Expensive.
They come with a price. They're not cheap. But cheap doesn't always work, right? So they're worth every penny. But yeah, let's just say you don't have the money for it. You don't have the budget for it, right? Got to spend less. What's your next scenario, Chad?
The F4.
F4, right? That's another one. The regenerative blowers, F4, those machines. Let's talk about the F4 because that's a ShopSabre product, specifically exclusive by ShopSabre. It's a tangential bypass motor, which operates similar to a regenerative pump, has no external filters. Instead, it runs on a brushed motor, okay? So there's some maintenance there, replacing brushes and whatnot as needed. But the alternative is a regenerative blower, has no brushes on the motor, a little bit more expensive pump up front, and has an external filter that you got to clean, right? That's your next step. The F4, the regenerative pumps produce high CFM, and they're going to be medium HG applications is what I would call it.
Yeah.
Right? And then on smaller parts, regenerative blowers or F4 pumps, they're going to struggle a little bit. Are they not?
Correct.
I mean, they're not designed for small parts. You know, you're going to have to do things like vacuum strategies, right? And lower HG usually requires some sort of a vacuum strategy. What kind of vacuum strategies are you guys recommending to your customers?
Tab,
Tabbing them?
onion skin, the two common that I said.
Yep. Explain that a little bit. Do you guys mind? What the heck is gasketing? What the heck is tabbing? What is onion skinning? What is onion skins? Let's talk about that. Besides something that makes you cry.
Just cutting away material until you just have a thin piece of material connecting the part to the sheet, so you're not actually losing the flow from underneath the part.
So basically, you would say it's not cutting all the way through, truly.
Yeah, exactly.
You're basically cutting all the way down to a very thin layer of material remaining, and then at the end, you use a knife or something like that, and you cut it out by hand, or you break it out by hand and then just sand off that remaining skin.
Kind of the same with the tab. You just leave a little tab there. You cut through most of the part, leave a little tab, and then you come back at the end and cut the tab.
The tab would remind you, if for those listening, the old like erector set.
We used to break
Remember
them
that?
out.
Yeah.
As soon as you were going to it,
Yeah, you used to have to break out your parts. Remember that? Like they'd show up and then like you'd make it was like old model cars. Did you guys ever do that? Like I did that with my dad.
Absolutely.
And then you had to break out, you snap out the parts, and then you put the parts together that way and you glue them. You know.
It's really funny you're talking about this because I know last week, me and you, Brandon, talked about the fact that I worked in a Korean shop 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing that I always wondered about when they were cutting out these, the countertops or the backsplashes that we would make is why aren't they cutting this stuff all the way through so we don't have to spend all this time knocking the edges off with a file? But now, obviously, spending the last, 30 minutes talking about this, it all makes a lot more sense. It's just kind of funny how you educate yourself on those things.
Keeping it from moving around.
Back in the day, you were like, this is so much extra work, but obviously now realizing why.
you're going to call back and apologize to him for being a disgruntled employee.
Nope, because I definitely wasn't. It was just questions in my head, like, why are we doing this all the time?
Besides, we don't need to deal with the corporate guys, right?
And the corporations sit there in their corporation buildings and see that they're all corporation-y and they make money.
Makes sense, right?
Makes perfect sense.
So, disgruntled Nick over there. Why are we doing this? This makes zero sense.
But I guess also kind of while listening to all this, obviously being not as educated as you guys are on this, why do people still not go with vacuum hold down on their machines? I mean, is it simply just the cost?
Cost mainly.
Cost or power.
Power. Yep.
But we can always make the machine vacuum ready. So that's because a vacuum is crucial to most applications. So you want at least make it vacuum ready so you can add a pump later. But, certain people don't think they need it, don't want to have it.
When a lot of people also don't know that you can get single phase applications with some of these pumps. Obviously, we have it set up where you can include a VFD to make it work. Other companies do not. So they're like, I just don't have 3-phase, can't use it. We can get a solution.
ShopSabre has the strongest single phase pump on the market.
That's what I hear.
Absolutely.
And you might be able to buy it on the internet now on ShopSabre.com. Right, Brandon?
I hear that as well.
Just kidding.
No, it's true. But yeah, it's a good point, though, that power used to be a big problem. Like when I started selling CNC machines, which neither one of you guys even probably knew what a CNC machine was back when I was starting selling them, but we didn't have single phase options. Like literally there was 0 single phase vacuum pumps. Nothing. And then a pump came out that is currently still available, and we started selling it. And it worked okay. But it had its downfalls. I mean, it was the first ever single phase pump, and it worked for an entry level solution. Let's put it that way, right? It wasn't a production solution, but it got people into vacuum. And then the world really took off. Once people realized there was a market for it, then pumps started to become available in single phase power. And these, motor starters became in single phase. And you started getting inverters and phase converters, and all this stuff that started allowing the stuff to really take off. And then suddenly, now everything can pretty much run on single phase. And vacuum is almost a necessity on everything. Like when I started selling CNC machines, vacuum wasn't even a necessity on like 50% of the applications. People clamped or screwed everything down.
Well, like you said, the machines were a lot slower then.
They were so slow. But I think that's why they got faster too, though. Largely because you can hold parts down now.
Yep.
Before you had to be so methodical about everything that you couldn't go fast. And now with the correct vacuum pumps and the vacuum tables and the evolution of all this stuff, CNC machines have gotten really damn fast. I mean, that IS gets moving out there, and I step back every time it comes at me.
Yeah, I was out there when they were doing the ISM.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That thing's crazy.
That's
At the show, we used to, fun story, when we released the ISM, we had the ISM pointed at the crowd. So that way the gantry moved towards people, and the aisle would walk towards it, and then you'd get to our booth, and you had to turn. Like the way the aisle was set up is you had to turn, but people had to come like walk at our machine. And we would randomly make the machine go from the back of the machine to the front and stop. And the whole crowd that would be walking on that aisle at that moment would stop in their tracks, so they thought that machine was going to hit them because it was so fast. And that's what's cool about it. Like, that's how fast machines have become, is that it literally will stop people in their tracks because it's moving so quick. And 10 years ago, that wasn't the case.
Right.
Machines didn't move at those speeds. So, like I said, vacuum's a big part of the purchase, and I think that's a big area that people cut corners on. And to me, it's frustrating to see people get taken advantage of.
correct.
Because in the world that we live in, it's the educating yourself isn't that hard nowadays. But yet people still pull it off, right? Oh, same machine as yours, $10,000 less. Can I see the quote? No need to. Same machine. All right. Good luck. Like, we all know that it's not the same machine for $10,000 less. There's something going on. We're missing something somewhere.
Yep.
So when we start looking at it, it's like, okay, what are you not getting? Just like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that our machines are the same as a $250,000 machine. It's not the same. The difference is there's really categories when you start looking at machines, and we're in like a unique world where we're at. Like the sub $100,000 machine category is kind of unique because I would say actually a sub $150,000 range, because basically the machines at $150,000 and down, they all kind of compete against each other down to like $40,000. And then at $40,000 and down, there's a whole nother category of machines. And it's started to creep up a little bit, I would say. That's now maybe pushing 50,000, but you start to see a very different product, where when you look at a $350,000 machine versus a $150,000 machine, people expect there to be a major difference. But when people look at a $40,000 machine versus a $70,000 machine, it's the same machine. Why would you think it's the same machine?
I don't have a good answer for that.
But that's the point, is it's like people accept that, yeah, there's obviously a difference between a $150,000 machine and a $300,000, but they won't accept it when it's a smaller margin,
And if you think about it, the $30,000 jump into a $70,000 is more of a
Correct.
percentage increase than the
Correct.
150 to 300. So
correct, and that's my point, is
You're
that
still
you end
paying
up in
almost
those,
double.
you end up in that scenario, and it's really pound for pound, dollar for dollar. You're actually having to figure it out a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? Because like at $300,000, there's a lot of money being spent there. So maybe you're willing to do your research a little bit more there, but like at $70,000, as you said it earlier, Chad, like we grew up in an industry or in an age where people are okay with throwing things away. Well, if it doesn't work, I guess I buy another one. Like, why would you do that to yourself? Like, why don't you just buy something that's proven? That I'm proving to you by fact that I'm selling you something they aren't. I'm giving you a vacuum pump that's going to hold down the parts that you're trying to hold down versus having to sit there and struggle.
doesn't make any sense.
Or guys will go, I'll just slow down, right? So how did that machine become more profitable now?
Right.
It's taking you longer to do the same job that now your competitor is doing in half the time. That's my favorite thing, and I love doing it, and I have done it for years, is when people look at our machines and then they go, oh, I'm just going to buy a Chinese machine or a knockoff machine or whatever it is. The first thing I do is start marketing to all their competitors in the area. So I want to help their competitors beat them. Like, I'm going to sell, I'll sell a machine to every shop in your area, and they'll all be using ShopSabres, and you're using this knockoff, and when you're cutting at 50% the speed they are, you can't keep up with your competitors. Like, we'll just do that then. Like, sell it to your competitor then. If you don't want it, then maybe your competitor wants to go faster.
Yep.
And then 12 months down the road, they're going to come back.
Yeah, like, I can't keep up with the guys in the area. Oh, weird. Guy
I
bought
went and saw
ShopSabre down the street.
so-and-so's machine. Man, that thing's fast.
Yeah. Oh, weird.
Yeah, it's a ShopSabre.
And guess what? This year it's going to cost you another $20,000 because
Yeah.
there's been price increases.
Right.
and
Well,
everything.
that's what happens. Is exactly that. And then people get mad at us. Well, you got to sell it to me at last year's price. I would love to. I can't. I can't buy it for what I could last year. The pumps aren't the same price as they were last year. Like, the pump prices go up, and we get typically 1 to 2 price increases, it seems like, every year on vacuum pumps.
Yep.
Vacuum technology is not getting cheaper. It's getting better, but it's not getting cheaper. And so as that stuff happens and more technology becomes available, you got to pay to play, right? Mm-hmm. And we are not a company that's going to cut corners. That's just not who we are. We build machines for the long term. And when you build machines with the mentality of performance and quality, you tend to get better service too.
For sure.
And I think a big part of our service and education and support and everything we've talked about in the last few weeks is this type of thing. We understand it better, right? We understand the difference in technology. Hopefully today, like, I kind of verbal diarrheaed for a little while and explained a lot about vacuum pumps, but hopefully it taught you a little bit about vacuum. And I encourage you to think about what we just said. And if you have a machine and you're running a machine right now and you've been struggling, like, think about what I just said. Is your vacuum pump maybe the reason? Do you have the wrong pump? Do you have the wrong machine? Maybe your vacuum table is not built the way you need it to be built for what you're doing. It's very possible. And the easiest way to find that out is you call a sales guy that can talk about vacuum, right?
Ask questions.
Ask questions. What do you guys think? Anything else about vacuum? What am I missing? I know that there's got to be more on your mind here.
Well, I think with a machine that's paired correctly for the application, it's easier for us to provide lifetime tech support. Because they have the right equipment for the job.
Correct.
Now we just got to get the operator up and going.
Correct.
We know the machine's going to produce. We know the pump is good.
Yep.
So our only thing we need to overcome now is getting that customer trained.
You're not fighting the technology.
Exactly.
It's
So
one thing when you got to learn something that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But when you know them, like you said, we're confident that our machine will work when used correctly. It's a lot easier to support you. We just got to teach you. But oh man, I hope that pump's working.
lower quality machines, lower quality pumps come with lower quality and less support.
Yeah. I mean, low quality produces low quality, right?
For sure.
That's what you can expect from it. Travis, you said like 4 words this entire episode. You doing okay over there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just guess taking it all in.
Taking it all in. I like it.
He's learned so much today.
He wrote so many notes down. No, I'm giving him a hard time. But, you have to understand what you're doing to make sure that, you're getting what you expect. And the sales rep, if he doesn't know what you're doing, how is he recommending a vacuum pump? If he's not asking you what you're cutting, what materials, the thicknesses, the size of the sheets, all that, he can't possibly be quoting you the right solution. Selling your machine is only 50% of the equation. Selling you the right equipment is the other 50%. Anybody can sell you a machine. Shit, my wife can sell you one. You want to buy one, Amy will sell you a machine. I will guarantee you that it's going to be a machine. I don't know what's going to be on it, but good luck. Or you can talk to guys like Chad and Travis and the guys here who are trained, and they're going to ask you the right questions, and they'll sell you the right machine.
Correct.
So, not to pick on my wife, but she's not going to sell you the right vacuum pump. I'll promise you that.
She'll be able to teach you how to read.
She'll be able to teach you to read, though.
For sure.
Hey, that actually might help.
Some people need that, Travis.
But vacuum is easy for competitors to cut corners on. That's why we talked about vacuum specifically. It's an easy subject for people to get misled on. ShopSabre offers, so many different solutions and pumps and brands, and, sometimes budget doesn't necessarily produce the right answer. Buying the pump based on a price versus the technology can lead to problems down the road.
Correct.
I'd still say that the good news for us, though, is that if somebody is on a budget but still has to have vacuum, at least we can give them a solution to get started
Correct.
with. I mean, we'll be honest about it, but we can let them know that you can always upgrade later.
Well, I think that's the part of this whole thing is our weakest pump is stronger than the pump that's
correct.
being sold on every machine that they offer.
Isn't that crazy?
Like the pumps that we're straying away from and trying to talk people out of is double the CFM and double the pressure of the other competitors' pumps. So
Their main pump.
It's
Like their go-to bread and butter pumps are 50% the holding power of what we produce.
that to me is outrageous.
And the best part, this is what throws me off the most, is we sell those pumps, our pumps, to customers, and we get people who push back on us like, this pump doesn't work, right? Just imagine if we had actually sold them what the other people want to sell them.
Right.
Like, my God, like we take a beating sometimes on things that we try to explain.
But for us, we could sell a pump at a fraction of a cost, and maybe we could, sell a few more machines. But is that how ShopSabre does business?
No.
Not a chance.
Exactly. So we don't even offer it when, that's my thing, Brandon. We should offer it. F it.
That's it's aggressive. No, but like I said, you got to be prepared to spend the money on the right tool, and that's exactly it.
For sure.
Chad is 100% right. I can go to China too and buy stuff. I can buy shit. You want me to buy shit? I can go buy it too. I have no issue doing that. But wait, I do have an issue with it because I'm ShopSabre.
And we're gonna be with you for the next 10 years.
Because I got to deal with it.
Right.
Because who's going to call me and yell at me every time he turns his vacuum pump on? I don't want to deal with that guy.
Exactly.
So to me, it just makes sense to build the machine correctly. Some of your competitors are going to tell you, oh yeah, we got a vacuum pump, and that thing is going to work just as good as the ShopSabre.
You sit on a throne of lies.
It's not going to work as good as the ShopSabre.
It's a buy once, cry once.
Buy once, cry once. But
I like that.
that's what I got today, guys. With that, you got to go to ShopSabre if you want more information.
ShopSabre.com.
We now got vacuum lifts that we're going to start selling. We got the right vacuum pumps. We got the whole setup. If you need it, call us.
The coolest people in the industry.
We are the coolest people in the industry.
For sure.
Kyle, you're included.
Yeah, I have various responsibilities within the crew. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, really.
That's Kyle.
Thank you.
No problem. I got you, Kyle. But yeah, like I said, with that, I'm Brandon.
I'm Chad.
I'm Travis.
I'm Kyle.
And I'm Nick.
Thanks for talking shop with ShopSabre.